Okay, let's take some notes on the three states of matter: solids, liquids, and gases. So, in your notes at the top, states of matter change due to temperature. So, yesterday or 2 days ago in our Oobleck lab, we noticed how cornstarch changes state based on adding more or less water. Now, that's not a typical change of state. All things can change their state of matter from solid to liquid to gas, and sometimes even plasma, the fourth state of matter, by adding or taking away heat or increasing their temperature. Okay, so let's talk about what is a solid. You guys know what it is, but we're going to put it into scientific terms. So, in a solid, you have what's called a definite shape. So, a solid is something that you can pick up, hold it in your hand, and it keeps its shape. Solids are always visible. Even if they're clear or see-through, they're always visible. And if you could see the atoms or molecules in a solid, they would be in place, touching, but still vibrating in place. So they're not moving around, but they do have a little bit of motion. They're just vibrating. So what about liquids? How are liquids different from solids? Well, look at all these pictures. They all have certain behaviors that we are familiar with. Let's put them into scientific terms. So liquids have no definite shape. So that is what makes them sort of flow. They can splash. They move around. They basically just change their shape constantly. However, they have a definite volume. So the amount of space they take up is the same no matter what container they're in. They always take up the same amount of space. So if we have a cup of water in a cup, if you pour it into a water bottle, it still takes up the same amount of space, even if it's in a different shape. And the molecules are close, but they're moving. So this is a nice diagram of what molecules in a liquid do. So they're all touching. That's why there's no big spaces in between them. They're all touching, but they're spinning around in place. They're moving in between each other. They're just always kind of constantly moving around inside the liquid. Okay, so then that brings us to gases. So what is a gas and how does it act? Well, a gas has no definite shape, so it also can flow like a liquid. Some gases you can pour them, so they don't have a definite shape. They also don't have a definite volume. Gases take up as much space as they're allowed to take up. So if you fill a balloon, they're gonna stretch that balloon as much as they can. If you empty that balloon into a room, they're gonna fill every corner, fly into every corner of that room, just like you're seeing in this box with the blue and red gas particles bouncing around. Gases are often invisible because there are such big gaps in between the particles that make up gases. It's common that they are invisible to us. And molecules in gases are far apart and moving freely. So look at how much space there are between these gas particles. The rest of it is just empty. So they are pretty far apart compared to liquid and solid, and they're moving around freely and fast. All right, so let's talk about what it means to change the state. So look at this diagram. It's already in your notes. Almost any type of matter can go from a solid to a liquid to a gas under the right conditions. So when a type of matter goes from solid to liquid, we call that melting, right? So if a bar of chocolate starts off solid, but it gets too hot in the sun or in your hand, it goes to a liquid, it melted. If you have a liquid turning into gas, so for instance, you are boiling a pot of water and that water disappears after a while. You left it on the stove for too long. Well, it turned into gas, it's now in the air, and we call that evaporation. Here it's boiling, but the actual process of moving from liquid into gas state is called evaporation. So make sure you write that down. Now, the opposite of that, if your gas is changing back into liquid form, forming liquid droplets and then a big puddle or cup of liquid, that is called condensation. And then if you take liquid and you change it back into a solid, that requires freezing. So liquid to solid, that is called freezing. Now there are a couple of rare state changes. It is possible for a solid to completely skip over the liquid state and go straight to being a gas. And that is called sublimation. The opposite of that, if you have a gas that skips right over the liquid state and goes into a solid form, it is called deposition. So there are two vocabulary terms at the bottom here. The boiling point is the temperature that causes a liquid to change to gas. So the boiling point is the point when a liquid starts to boil, which is part of the process of changing into a gas or evaporating. Boiling point is the temperature that causes a liquid to change into a gas. So a boiling point could be like 100 degrees Celsius for water. It is. For other things, it can be higher or lower depending on what the matter is. What's the matter? Melting point is the temperature that causes a solid to change to liquid. So the melting point for water would be 0 degrees centigrade. The melting point for metal would be much higher than that. It takes a lot more heat to melt any kind of metal. The melting point for chocolate might be a little bit higher than the melting point for water. And you get the idea. So the melting point is the temperature that causes a solid to change to liquid. All right, so that's the end of our notes for today.